Hello, everybody. I'm going to do a webinar today about how to write a personal statement for Canadian universities, but also how you can write these types of personal statements for all world universities. So that would include countries like the Netherlands, Ireland, Japan, various countries around Europe. A lot of university systems are going to have these type of personal statements. They're called different things in different countries. Some countries call them letter of motivation. That's in the Netherlands. It is not a letter. You don't have to write Dear Admissions. It is just a personal statement. Some university systems call it a personal profile. You see here UBC uses that word, personal profile questions. Really what it is all about is the why essay and the why us essay. You're really saying why you want to study what you want to study and why do you want to study at UBC. Or why you want to study it in fill in the blank world university, Utrecht, Erasmus, whatever. So when you're talking about why you want to go to the school, you're also going to bring up the what's called value to campus argument. What are you bringing to the Utrecht community? What are you bringing to the UBC community? Lots of Canadian universities have these types of questions if you have to write a personal profile or personal statement for those universities. So let's get started now. If you see here, these three questions are actually the same. So it says up here that you won't have all of these questions. It'll be depending upon your major. In Canada, that's very common that depending upon your major, you will have to answer certain questions. And sometimes you don't have to have any personal statement if you have certain majors like in the humanities. But for UBC, everyone has to fill out a personal profile. And also for Dutch universities, university colleges particularly, and many world universities, every student will have to write a personal statement. So these three questions that I've highlighted here, really about why you want to go to the university, what you value, why, and why you want to go to that university. So briefly describe your school community and your involvement within it. What impact has the school culture had on you? How would you enhance or change it? That's just a thinly veiled why question, what you value and why you want to go to that university. Tell us about who you are, what is important to you, and why. There you go, just straight up why question. So really, these questions here are pretty much asking the same thing. So it doesn't really matter which one you get. Your argument is going to be the same. What do you like? What do you value? What are you interested in? And why do you want to study that or take that at fill in the blank World University? Here we're using UBC as an example. You see here to explain how you respond to a problem and or unfamiliar situation. This is usually sort of an engineering type question. Maybe not everyone will have to answer this question, but really it's a similar question to what you value and why, because explaining you a problem, unfamiliar situation, what did you do, what was the outcome, and what did you learn from the experience, you're still really going to talk about this value argument. And in somewhat of the same ways for world universities, you're going to see that they ask you questions that are relatively similar, but you have to give unique answers to each question. So that's kind of the challenge sometimes. What we like students to do is read the questions that they are going to answer, copy those questions into a Google document, and write responses to each of the questions in the Google document, then put that link into an email, send it to your counselor of record. They will go back and forth with you on a draft of that Google document. When you're done with the drafting phases, excuse me, you'll then cut and paste those short paragraphs back into the application. So a lot of these applications will have little boxes that you can write in. Please do not write in those little boxes. You should always copy the questions over into a Google Doc, write the drafts there, send it in an email to your counselor on Power School, go back and forth in draft form for that, and then cut and paste your final versions back into the application boxes. Okay, so that's really important. If you have, let's say, 3 different questions you have to answer, whether it be for Erasmus or whether it be for Canadian University, you should mention the university and your major in at least 1, if not 2, of the 3 questions. So if you have 3 questions, you should definitely mention your university at least 1 of them and maybe 2 of them. If you have 5 questions, you should mention your major and or university in about 3 of them. That means that the majority of your responses should bring back around what you want to study and why you want to study that at that particular university. So that's for these questions up here if you get one or the other of them, depending upon what major. Remember, you're not going to get all of these questions. It says you could be asked all of the following, but it's likely that you'll get some of the following. Okay? Then the next portion is really an activities list. What I would suggest to do, especially if you have more than 5 activities you want to add, once again, being sure to do this on a draft form in a Google Doc, and then sending us an email that says, here's the link. Please pay attention to my activities list and seeing if the 10 activities I have can be taken down to the 5 most important. If you don't have more than 5 activities, that's not a problem. More isn't necessarily going to get you in. It's really about quality. And remember, we want to make sure you have 50 words per description. You want to make sure you say how many hours per week, how many weeks per year, and quantify your efforts in those clubs or activities. So for example, if you were part of the play, the musical, you spent, let's say 6 hours per week for 15 weeks rehearsing for the musical, that then in the end you gave 10 performances of that musical to an audience of 800 people per time. That would be if the whole theater was full every time you gave a performance. That's just an example of quantifying your activity. Very important to do. Anyone coming from the USA process knows this already, but for the world process, really important to quantify what it is you do. So make sure you say what the thing is. Obviously, you don't explain obvious things. So you don't say, in the musical, we sang songs and read lines. That's obvious, right? You don't want to say, I played varsity soccer, where I helped on the team, pass the ball to score a goal. Like, that's super obvious. And it happens. Kids put that in their activities list. So don't do any of that. Don't explain what soccer is, right? But if you have something like GIN, and that's Global Issues Network, you're going to have to explain maybe a sentence or 2 about what GIN is, what your responsibilities or roles were in that activity, and any information, any data, any numbers that you can tell them. Like, I went to an international GIN meeting with 15 other schools from 30 countries, for example. Okay, so they have all these different categories. You can choose which category. Likely for Dutch University, you're going to have to make a CV or resume. I do have examples of that, but really here you see they already gave you some pretty good indications of what the different sections are in a resume. For Canada, you may have to make a resume depending upon your school's requirements. Some schools actually do require a resume in Canada. But for UBC, as we see here, they have the resume included in their application process. Okay, so then the next one goes, tell us more about 1 or 2 activities listed above that are important to you. This is a classic question that gets asked at lots of Dutch universities as well and world universities. I usually tell students to choose 2. just because it allows you to really show what you got. But look, if you only have 3 activities and really only one that you're interested in, just do one. As always, more isn't better. You just want it to be a quality argument for, once again, why you did this thing, explain the role you played and what you learned in the process. Well, we're going to hopefully explain your role up here. So down here, what you actually want to do is say, how does it show what you value and why you want to do that at UBC, right? Or fill in the blank university. We had a student that applied to Erasmus. He was applying for econometrics, and he said that he wanted to bring a roller hockey club to Erasmus. So roller hockey is, hockey using rollerblades. So what he did was research to make sure that Erasmus doesn't have a roller hockey team, and then said he wanted to bring that to the school. So it wasn't really related to his major at all, but it was something he was passionate about, and it was something that I thought was pretty unique. So he thought, should I say this? And I said, yeah, especially if you want to do that. Now, of course, did he even go to Erasmus? No. So it's not like we want you to be honest about what your intentions are, but if you didn't end up creating a roller hockey team, it doesn't mean that you're going to fail out of school or something like that, So if you, for example, are in a rock band at Nido and maybe in Tri-M, let's say, and you want to do that at university, you can say you'll do that at UBC. Just make sure that they have a musical honor society before you suggest you would like to join it. And also, if you say you wanted to start a musical society and they already had one at UBC, that's not good either, right? So we want to make sure that it's honest, but also well researched. Additional information section down here. This is definitely where National Plan students can say if your IB choices were impacted by the National Plan. You can put that here. Dutch universities have this question a lot, as well as all world universities. So remember, when you're filling in this additional information, if you have extenuating circumstances, you were sick, you changed schools, changed countries, this is where you want to put that information. But if you don't have those things, we want this last part is what you're answering. What have you done to prepare yourself specifically for your intended area of study at UBC? This is one more chance to tell them what you want to major in and why you want to do it at UBC, right? So once again, we're going back to the top and talking about the exact same stuff. So really what I like students to do is actually read the questions they're going to have to answer, and in the Google Doc, make notes under each one about what it is you'd like to say. And not necessarily thinking about like, oh, okay, so I want to explain how I responded to a problem, for example, right? And then you write that one and then you go on to the next one. Don't do it that way. Think about, 4 or 5 different things that you bring to the UBC campus, or 4 or 5 things about why you want to study, what it is you want to study, and why you want to study at UBC. List those, down the side of a Google document next to the questions, and then see where your answers fit into the questions. It's a lot easier to, first of all, think about what I value and why, what do I want to study and why do I want to study at said university, and then write some things down there, write some notes, and then plug it into the questions where they are appropriate, and then tweak them to make sure that you answer the question. I feel that this strategy is a lot easier to do because students struggle a lot with connecting their answers into a coherent theme, and also they struggle with each question being like an individual essay, where it's not really that way. Remember, these are questions that represent a totality of an essay. They're just split up. So we want to make sure, and if you have really strong, for example, Def Hacks was your big thing, we want to make sure that you get it in there and explain it to its fullest, but also taking it a step further and saying, is that why then I want to study computer science, for example, and I want to study at the UBC because why, right? And I always tell students, you can look at the obvious, but then go beyond it, right? So if you're like, I want to study computer science at UBC because UBC has the highest ranked program. We never talk about ranking of a university, location, weather, size. None of that matters, right? Specific elements of the program is what the university is looking for, right? So if we're talking about computer science, you could say, for example, instead of saying UBC has a top-ranked computer science program, remember that's bad. You want to say something like, for example, UBC on their campus has a building that is climate controlled using a mix of sustainable technology and artificial intelligence. I want to work in a computer science department that is doing cutting edge research into AI and sustainability and their relationship. And then you can even name a professor under Professor so-and-so, who's the head of the department. Bam. That is what I'm talking about. It's going much beyond the obvious of, yeah, UBC has a top-ranked program. Don't say that. Say the thing of why it has a top-ranked program, because it's the only university in the world that has an AI sustainability building, for example. Don't use that as an example. I actually don't know if UBC has a building controlled by AI. Just an example. But that's the type of research you should be doing. Digging deeper into the school. And it doesn't have to be super academic, I had a student want to go to UBC, because it was in a forest and it had a beach. And he wanted to be an engineer. And he's like, while I'm thinking about how to develop a water system that turns sewage into drinkable water, I'm going to walk through the trees of UBC and go to the beach and draw my plans out in the sand with a stick. Perfect argument, right? Now, that was a little bit of location, right? That was a little bit of some of the things that we've told you to sort of shy away from, but it's obvious that that kid did research about the location of the university and something about that particular onda of the place really spoke to them, right? So it wasn't just an obvious thing. It wasn't like, oh, because, Vancouver is the hub of technology, right? That's kind of a little weak, that's sort of an obvious Wikipedia answer. But, to smell the UBC forest as I'm designing sustainable, solutions for our future of humanity, and sitting at the beach and really painting that picture. That really spoke to UBC and their perception of how you view their school. And that's exactly the same thing for Dutch universities. I use those examples a lot of, yeah, sure, like shy away from talking about location, size, etc. But if the location and size you can prove by saying small class size is what I'm looking for so that I can have a similar debate at the Harkness table like I had at NITO, that's the kind of similarities drawing comparisons, the specific comparisons you can draw that universities are looking for. Last thing here, we're going to go over in another webinar about how to do the World Letter of Recommendation request to make sure that everyone's on the same page about that. But this is just for UBC kids particularly, but also any world kids that has an email address entering. You have to always pick one teacher and your counselor on PowerSchool. Those are the two people that should be writing references for you. Likely in Canada, they won't actually write a reference for you. The school counselor's job is to make sure and certify your activities list that you see here and any information. And then the teacher's job is just to make sure that they have an academic reference. The teacher should be someone who taught you in 11th and 12th grade, and it should be a major subject, meaning math, English, science, social studies, or language. It should be one of those 5. It can be an encore teacher if that's part of your major. If it's not part of your major, it's better to have an academic teacher, in my opinion. That also works for other world universities. However, Dutch university colleges largely will require full letters of recommendation. So when you put in that teacher email, they will probably write a reference for you. That's where we'll stop for now. So that's how to write a world university personal statement. Also some help about the UBC personal statement. Remember, U of T, Concordia, most of Canada will have something that's very similar. Also, all world universities use this style and format. Even if they have it tweaked a bit, this is your proof, what you value, why, and what value are you bringing to our campus. And yeah, great. Great. So I hope this has been informative, and good luck writing.